categorized as slaves in some capacity because the work was so onerous, so tough, so hard, and it would take 100,000 or more people. Were there really 100,000 artisans prepared to do that kind of heavy duty work? Or is it not more likely that it was a mix of the two?
The question of slavery in ancient Egypt is actually one that is very interesting, if not troubling, to understand. One of those things about slavery in ancient Egypt is that we must understand that it is worlds apart from the type of slavery that we would get later in years, where people were being captured, stoned to death, and their lives were not of no value outside of their service. So, in other words, these people were purely used for domination. The women were breeded, the men were used to move large things, and their health was of no concern to anyone. The people who worked on the pyramids are not like this at all. The word slave, I think there a lot of people are trying to exaggerate it because, of course, well, one, they want to tarnish the reputation of the Egyptians, but two, they want to believe that hard work requires some level of subjugation, which is not true. It's quite obvious that in ancient Egypt, the majority of the pyramids were built with skilled labor. And you can tell this because even in times of Egypt where there were slaves, they couldn't build half the stuff that they built there. And also, do you really believe that slaves are capable of building something like the pyramid with such precision? Slaves, for the most part, do not do work that requires a high level of intelligence. If they did exist, they would be the ones who are doing the dog work. And so effectively, it would still be the smart people building the pyramids.
Jimmy Corsetti, the host of the Bright Insight YouTube channel, and from the debunking channel, Dan Richards. Welcome to both of you. We had you both on before, of course. Jimmy Corsetti, what would you like to say to Dr. Hawass about his recent revelation from his team's research that they believe the pyramids were not built by slaves, and there weren't 100,000, there were about 10,000, and they were artisans at the time?
Now, something to remember about what he just said, by the way, this is a Piers Morgan clip where they were debating things on Egypt, and I don't know why they debated the way they did, but they did. But on what he said, 100,000 men is a pretty large number to organize, and it's not clear that ancient Egyptians could have organized 100,000 men to work on anything. But 10,000 is more controllable. Imagine having 100,000 slaves. That's like Tower of Babel type stuff where things are not going to go the way you think they are. People are doing all kinds of things in their own way. Now, remember, the pyramids, according to people like Herodotus and also some of the ancient Egyptian texts, they take about 25 to 30 years to build. So, in other words, if 100,000 men can build a pyramid in 10 years, then 10,000, you can do the math, it gets smaller and smaller. But in real life, 100,000 men could not build. What's that old quote again? I think it's something like if it takes 1,000 men to build a house in one day, how long is it going to take 1,000,000 men? And then the answer is something like 1 second to build a house, which obviously the more people you add, it at some point there's diminishing returns. You can't just keep adding people and expect the time to shrink. It's always going to stay the same. Oh, and the third thing, some people look at slaves as if, they're cheap or something like that. They're definitely cheaper than paying people, but you still have to feed them, otherwise they'll die. So 100,000 workers, that's a crazy number.
To be honest, well, let me first say, Piers, thank you for having me back on. And Zahi, it's a pleasure to make your acquaintance. There's a few things I take
Thank
issue
you.
with what he had said. First of all, this Scan Pyramids project, that initial discovery was back in 2016, and it was corroborated into a published study in 2017. Well, when you look from 2016 to 2025, that's 9 years ago. That's almost a decade. And I'm trying to understand why we wouldn't have drilled a half-inch diameter hole and sent in a endoscope camera into this hidden chamber. Because let's not forget that the Great Pyramid of Giza is arguably the most mysterious and debated structure in all of human history. We don't know exactly how it was constructed. And in fact, how it was constructed is one of the most debated topics. Another debated topic is whether it was actually built to be a tomb for the pharaohs, because after all, we never found any mummy in any Egyptian pyramid ever.
One of the claims that some conspiracy theorists make about the pyramids is that they were never used for burying the dead. But in fact, they were used for burying the dead. And the way we know is that some tombs, this is a pyramid, but I'll explain that soon. But some of these tombs were where they were abandoned and not opened and probably not recognizable, or people couldn't find the entrance to them. They still housed some mummies inside. For example, this pyramid belongs to Serenput II. Although this site looks ridiculous on the outside because it has fallen, the structure has not held up. On the inside, you can tell that it is a beautiful grave, and it was not plundered. Nothing was taken because people couldn't get in. And there is an entrance that you can get in, and it was found. And inside, they found a mummy inside this pyramid belonging to someone called Shammai. This mummy is 3,800 years old, and it should give the people who are conspiracy theorists no room for wiggle. Clearly, in the tombs of the pyramids, the people were located inside. And this is only one example, by the way. They've had to pull several mummies from pyramids, some of them which were collapsing onto these mummies because they were not well built. Now, of course, what they're trying to imply is that these tombs, which we can tell were used for this because they started off as mastabas, they try and imply that these tombs were not used for this, but for some other purpose, which of course is not written about by the ancient Egyptians. One of the things we know is that the ancient Egyptians called the pyramids Mer. As you can see, that symbol there, that triangle, that means Mer or Mur, which means rise or ascend. This is partly due to the shape, but it also has to do with what they wanted their king or their pharaoh to do in the afterlife. Not to mention that their entire religion revolves around this. And so you can find several examples of them referring to the pyramids when talking about all of this. So 317b, initial examination, this is one of the ones found inside of the pyramid. In other words, it's not true that the pyramids were used for anything outside of them being used for a grave. Now, is this useless? Is this something that was a waste of money considering how much effort it took? I agree. That's why it does seem suspect to some people. But in real life, human beings believed in religion, and they believed it this much. It's why some of the Greeks said some of the most religious people in history are the Egyptians, because they gave so much to their religion.
So, with those two significant points of debate, we could squash those debates by simply going in and exploring it. So, I guess
there is only one point of debate, and that point of debate is that the pyramid scan is worth something. But even that is useless because the one of the people who discovered it firstly believes that he believes in reptilian aliens. So he's already got no credibility. So you've got two claims: one of a scan which already has been considered suspect by experts of scans. I don't know why would they be against scans. And then two, the idea that inside pyramids we've never found mummies, which is ridiculous.
I guess I have a question for Dr. Hawass at this time, which is, why haven't we drilled into that hidden chamber? When will we do it? And the third question is, has it already been done so in secret?
You can already tell that this person's intention is to lay down a conspiracy theory and see who bites, but I have no interest in that. What I have interest in is the real answers of what's happening in ancient Egypt. Now, Zahi Hawass is going to ramble for a long time. I'm going to skip his answer and just go to the next question that the bearded guy is going to ask.
Can I just ask you, just on a personal level, about one thing that's constantly put out there as to whether you believe this is true, that the Great Pyramid of Giza is claimed to have a correlation with the Earth's circumference and polar radius, based on the idea that multiplying the pyramid's perimeter by 43,200 equals the Earth's equatorial circumference, and multiplying its height by 43,200 equals the Earth's polar radius. So that this number, 43,200, is also related to the precession of the Earth's axis. Is that all true?
The ancient Egyptians had high level of mathematics, and what they did and discovered is still unknown to this day. We have no idea exactly how far their maths went and what exactly they knew. But if we take the evidence that we already have, we know that the ancient Egyptians thought the world was flat. And they state this in many of their accounts. I can even show you Victory Stealers, where they mention the world as a not flat, but like as it appears when you look at it with your eyes. And then they have the dome, which is nut, as you can see here. So you have the flat earth, which is this god, not flat as in completely flat with its mountains and everything. And then you have the dome around it, which they thought was a solid structure. Keep that in mind. They had no idea what they were talking about when it came to the larger concepts. Now, the idea that they did is something that goes back hundreds of years, when people first discovered that the earth was round. And in fact, it's possible that the ancient Egyptians discovered that later in their history, but in the earlier periods, they thought that the world was flat. But when it was discovered, everyone started looking back into the ancient Egyptians as one of the smartest people, and also one of the people who left over a bunch of information, to see if the information matches up. And Isaac Newton is one of those people. And he claimed that if you go and read and learn some of the information in Egypt, you will find that they know about gravity, that they know about the earth, that they know about the sphere of the earth, that they know about other planets. But in real life, the ancient Egyptians were no different than any other people in the world during their time, and they believed the earth was flat like everybody else. And why wouldn't they? If you look at it, it looks flat. If you walk down the street, the world appears to be this thick piece of land where you look up and down, which it has ridges and whatever. It goes up and down. It has hills and crests, whatever you want. Now, there are some vague things that you could take to mean that the earth is round from ancient Egypt. For example, when the ancient Egyptians say Ra revolves around the world, meaning the earth, you could take this to mean that they believe that it's a sphere, but then you would then not believe in any flat earth people, because I can show you Zulu people who believe the earth is flat. I can show you people like that saying that the sun revolves around the sun. Or they say the sun revolves around the earth. So I will skip Zahi Hawas's answer since there was a non-answer. And also, I'll be honest, Zahi Hawass needs somebody to talk for him because he's not exactly in the right position to debate these people. There are much better Egyptologists who could come and state these things in better ways. Okay, I'll also skip 20 minutes because they spend the rest of the 20 minutes arguing over why they can't just drill into the pyramid so that they could find this secret hidden chamber, which, whatever the answer is, okay, let's go drill. But let's be honest, this is not going to satisfy anybody. If we drilled and we found nothing in there, they're just going to move it and be like, okay, why don't we go look under the Sphinx and under this? None of these people will ever be satisfied because the entire thing is based on continually talking about Egypt in a conspiratorial type of way.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Pierce. It's good to meet you, Zahi. I have a quick. When you were on Joe Rogan, you said that you didn't know what Zep Tepi was, and I figured I would give you a chance. I would imagine, as the premier Egyptologist in the world, you do know the Egyptian creation myth. Would you mind just explaining it to us real quick, so that to kind of vindicate yourself?
Okay, so over here, the guy with the beard is correct that Zahi Hawass said he doesn't know the word Zep Tepi, which is fine. He obviously knows about the creation myth, about the Nun, and how basically the world was created from the oceans and they gave birth to this guy and that guy. I've detailed this on my channel before, but clearly Zahi Hawass is not familiar with the word Zep Tepi, and I wouldn't expect him to be. There are probably sections not probably, absolutely sections in Egypt where some people deal more with the religion and others deal more with excavation, which Zahi Hawass is more in excavation. Now, this is not to excuse him. I think he should know this word, and I think he should definitely know exactly why it's an important time. Now, this is called the time before time or whatever they want to call it, but in real life, this Zep Tepi cannot be taken seriously. It's mythology. It's like trying to get the real answers of history from reading Greek mythology.
Show the world you do know what Zep Tepi is.
No, I mean, I know about the ancient Egyptian creation, but maybe I don't know this term.
See? Done. Easy. Doesn't know the term, but does know about the myth. It's like, there's a lot of people who are Christian, which, I could ask them words related to Christianity and you wouldn't know the original word related to it, but you would know the concept itself.
But what I'm saying, what this has to do with what we are discussing now.
Oh, it's very important because, I mean, it's the ancient Egyptian creation myth involves the primeval mound, right? And this is a symbolic bend.
Exactly.
This is something you're going to see all over the ancient world. So that term Zep Tepi is you see it in Egyptian without the vowels, but it's the Egyptian creation myth.
So for those of you who are interested, the word sap or sup, depending on how you feel like pronouncing it, I mean, he's pronouncing it as Zep, but it's not Zep, it's sup. This word means time or instance, but in real life, it means what's a good way of translating this in English? It means the movement, the time, the thing, the occurrence. So in other words, the word has to do with a time when something happens. So in other words, SERP is also used for words like when someone gets sick, or when someone suddenly becomes angry, or when someone falls down or something. It's like, that's the SUP. That's the moment something happened. and then tepi means first. So if you put these words together, sap taput, it means the first time. Now he's saying Zeptepi because that's how the Egyptologists write it with the E's, right? But this is the first time. This word is not that important outside of course, that's probably how the ancient Egyptians would have said the word, sap taput, but it doesn't really matter. And yes, this word was used. It's not really a word, but this phrase was used several times in ancient Egypt to refer to the first times. There are also other words. Other products are available.
It's kind of important. It's a very important lens to use when you're interpreting these artifacts. So when you were on Joe Rogan and he asked you what it was, and you said you didn't know what it was, that. So honestly, if you wouldn't mind, it's a good chance to vindicate yourself.
Again, they're not even saying the name correctly, so I would not be surprised that he wouldn't even know the term. But that's neither here nor there.
No, I teach the Egyptian creation, but I'm saying this term that you're talking about, I never heard of it. Maybe it is not in, I never heard it in the world of Egyptology. Maybe it's between the others, but I can tell you about creation, how the Egyptian created this world, but I don't understand why this has to do with.
So we can go away from this right now, even though he's going to continue to ask. What we need to look at is some of the important questions that they continue to ask.
Dan, let me ask you just on the wider point of the recent discovery by Dr. Hawass, or the claim from the research, that there were no slaves involved in the building of the pyramids.
To me, that's ludicrous. I mean, I worked construction for a long time, and they're using the food and the graves and stuff. And I mean, I saw many construction workers eating McDonald's while there was other construction workers eating steak. It just depends on if he's a foreman, if he's an engineer, or if he's just a grunt. The painters don't eat as good as the electricians, who don't eat as good as the engineers and the architects. So, having 10,000 people buried in the shade of the pyramid, in a grave, mind you, that only says they worked for Khufu, never says that they built the pyramid. So that's a stretch. It's an assumption that these are pyramid builder graves. But in addition to that, there could be graves of tens of thousands of slaves off the site that haven't been discovered that were doing all the grunt work while somebody else was holding the plumb bob. So to me.
So we're back to the slave thing again, which again, I'm not saying there were no slaves in ancient Egypt, and I'm not saying that they weren't involved. Obviously, if they were involved, they'd have to do most of the dog work inside of ancient Egypt. But what I'm trying to say is there is obviously a lot of evidence for skilled labor. What's the evidence for the slaves? Also, if you're having 10,000 skilled people, I'm guessing the slaves must outnumber that in order for you to justify them being there. There should be some kind of evidence.
To me, it's ludicrous to say there were no slaves involved.
But to be clear, and to be fair to Dr. Hawass, you don't know for a fact that it's not true, do you? What do you say?
Exactly. Speculation.
Of course not. That's ancient history, right? We can all speculate, we can all spitball, but the only things we really know are carbon dating and written records, kind of, sort of. But I mean, we fudge written records all the time, even today. So,
nope. All we know is not just carbon dating and written records. We also have artifacts from the time. And saying that we fudge written records is how a conspiracy theorist would look at things. You can see why people would lie about, why they would lie about a political position or whatever, but why would they lie about the size of a pyramid they built? Why would they lie about, oh yeah, we were scaling a house today and it was this big? What's the point of that?
All right, Jimmy, you raised your hand.
I completely agree with everything that Dan just said. However,
I'm shocked. You agree with him, huh?
Point out that, Zahi, you mentioned about the movement of stones, and you cited that 60-ton stone that they depict being moved on a wooden sledge. Well, that is only 60 tons, whereas the Egyptians had moved the 1,000 metric ton Ramesseum statue. 1,000 metric tons is well over 2.2 million pounds, and it was inexplicably moved approximately 170 miles from Aswan to Luxor. That is 17 times heavier than that statue that you repeatedly cite.
Okay, so here's an image from the tomb of Jehuti Hotep. It depicts the people in ancient Egypt, about 172 of them pulling a giant statue. Clearly, the statue is way bigger than any human, and there is someone who is pouring something on the ground, which is thought to make the sand more liquefied so that the wooden sled, can move. There is something that we don't understand about how they did it and when they did it and all this other stuff, but it's pretty obvious that they did not have any technology greater than this. Because forget how big this statue is by itself. Let's not even think about that. If they had better technology than this, then why are they moving this one like this? Not to mention that, this statue or this piece is only one. It's only one of the multiple people that we have who show doing this. I mean, if you go look at the Met, you'll find a lot of them. Unlike last time, I don't have to skip Zahi Hawas's answer because he's not even given a chance to answer. Instead, they ask him a question about why they're hiding the date of the ancient Egyptians. Anyway, the video continues down the same path where they basically ask him questions which are irrelevant. What I would ask him, if it was there, would be, how does a population remain completely unchanged for 4,000 years, even though it has many neighbors that constantly attack it? That's what I would ask him. None of these weird questions.